Hello, friends, and welcome to Understanding Atheism. My name is Pastor Kyle Meyer, and that is probably the beginning of your confusion. A pastor is teaching a course on atheism. Aren't those two people kind of playing for different sides? Aren't they playing for different teams? What is this all going to be about? And here on the onset, here at the very beginning of this course, I just want to set the record straight as to what is our goal, what is our primary objective here in the course of this class. What this class is not, what this course will not be, is giving you a bunch of ammunition and things to combat and debate your atheist friends. It is also not a means by which, not a crash course on how to convert your atheist and agnostic friends. This course is precisely what the title suggests. It is about better understanding atheism. It is about better understanding the people in our lives who don't ascribe to the same or any belief system, for that matter. I trust and I hope that as you're tuning into this, you find direct application with the stuff that we're talking about and the ways in which you can approach the people for whom this is true in your own life. For many of you, you know this is personal for you. You have children, you have friends, you have coworkers, you have people who you love and you cherish deeply who do not believe the same way that you do. And the goal of this course is to help you and I better love and serve our atheist and agnostic, our non-believing brothers and sisters. And the best way to do that, the only way to do that, the only way to love our neighbor is we first must understand our neighbor. And so that actually it also leads to the second goal of this course. So the main goal of this course is exactly what the title suggests, is to better understand atheism. But the second goal of this course is also to hear from our brothers and sisters who are atheists or agnostic. I'll talk about what those terms mean in a minute. To hear from them and to allow their critiques of organized religion to be received, to be processed, and perhaps what they can actually enable us to do is help us arrive at a better, healthier version of faith and religion than the one we were operating with before. If you are a person of faith, if you are a person who is attending a church right now, you know this to be true, that increasingly, specifically here in this country, but this trend is also not just here in America, but beyond, the trend is that more and more people are disassociating themselves from organized religion. So recently, a study was produced that found that nearly 1 in 4 persons that were interviewed, that were polled, said, I don't ascribe to any religion. I don't ascribe to any denomination. None is the box I check on this survey. None. I don't want any affiliation. And so increasingly, I think the church is going through this process whereby some individuals are getting frustrated. They're finding that the message of Jesus and the message of that the church preaches is not matching up with the way in which the church acts and behaves and lives their faith out in the world. And so what I hope this course also is it's not only giving you space to better understand friends who don't believe the same way as we do, but it also could be a chance for us to hear from folks outside the church as to how we can do better, how we can arrive and process, and how can we construct a faith and a belief system that more closely, more faithfully aligns with the things that we preach and the things that we talk about. So as we begin this course here today, I just want to say from the very, very onset that take a breath, it's going to be okay. Especially if you are a person of faith, I want you in the course of this conversation to, as we're engaging this material, as we're engaging this subject, and we're engaging critiques and perspectives from persons outside of our faith, I want you to adopt, number one, a posture not of defensive-ness, but of empathy. So at every turn, when I'm sharing information with you that has come through my study of atheism or conversations with non-believing persons in my own life, when I share this information, my prayer is that we can receive it in a posture not of defensiveness, but of empathy. Okay, that may not be my experience, but this person had this experience, or this is the conclusion they arrived at. And so again, the whole goal to try to better understand. And then number two, if the things that we share in the throughout the course of this class are true, then we need not be afraid. Especially we, people of faith, especially if you're a Christian, and we believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, then anything that we share in the process of this course, if it's true, we need not be afraid of it. In fact, we ought to embrace it. We ought to receive it. We ought to hear it not as some other person from outside our tradition critiquing our tradition, but we ought to hear it as potentially Jesus, God, who again, whoever is tuning in, if you belong to the Christian tradition or another tradition, we could experience if the things that we're hearing in the course of this class are true, that we need not to be afraid, and actually could be God using persons outside of our faith to help correct our faith, help correct believers and adopters of our faith. Okay, so here's how it's going to work throughout the course of these two sessions, and this course is two sessions. We're going to process really. I've kind of categorized this into two different themes, if you will. And I want to also encourage you to check out the application guide. So we've created an application guide to be a sort of companion to this conversation. That's a really, really great place to kind of you keep it handy or print it out and have it with you as you're watching these sessions, because some of the things that I'm sharing, I went ahead and sort of duplicated it in there so you could make sure you had them for your own notes. And there's also some discussion questions in there for you. So if you or a small group of people, or you and a friend, or maybe you've got someone in your life who does define themselves, does sort of categorize themselves as an atheist or agnostic person, maybe this is a chance for you guys to have a conversation and learn more about one another. And so again, I shared a couple of moments ago, I was going to do a little bit of defining of terms. So I'm going to use atheist and agnostic. I'm probably going to use them in combination, or I'm going to use them together often. They're different, but I'm going to sort of use them together to kind of really give you an imagination as to who I'm talking about and who we're talking to and who we're listening from. Right. And so an atheist is someone who does not believe in the existence of God. So they are someone who has reached that place where they can say unequivocally, empirically, no. The science, the data, all of those things do not, they don't produce the evidence that we would need to believe in the existence of an almighty being. An agnostic, so someone who has a sort of maybe an agnostic worldview, is maybe one click less, which is they've reached the place where they say, well, because there's not a lot of data, because there's so many wide-ranging opinions on which God is real, which God is not, and there's so many different religions out there, one cannot know. One simply cannot know if God exists or which God is real. And so I think a lot of the conversation that we're going to have today pertains to both people groups. And so I just wanted to sort of name that up front, define those up front so that you knew who we were talking about. And so that it could also spark some imagination in your own life of like, oh, I do know some atheist friends, and I know a lot of agnostic folks whose worldview maybe sort of just makes space that we cannot know. So one should not spend too much time belaboring that conversation. Okay, so again, these two sessions, I've broken them up into two themes, two categories, if you will. Really, what I want us, and we're in attempts to understand atheism, in attempts to understand folks who have a more agnostic worldview, those who choose to not adopt faith or religion as a part of their own belief system or practice. Really, the primary reasons in which they do so is twofold. It is because of how organized religion thinks. And then session 2, so we'll cover this in the next class, it's also because of how organized religion acts. Okay? So those are the two that I want you, if you're taking notes, feel free to jot those down, because those are going to be kind of like the main heading we're going to sort of filter this information through. Oftentimes, when I talk to folks who do not ascribe to any religion, it's because they have serious concerns, serious issue with the way in which organized religion thinks and the way in which organized religion acts. And so for session number 1, we're going to hang out here. We're going to talk about what are the criticisms or what are the concerns or the issues that non-believing friends have with the ways in which organized religion has traditionally or historically thought. So the way in which we've sort of conceived of and systematized and talked about our faith. Okay? And so the first issue When I have talked to folks who, in my own life, who are atheist or agnostic, and as I've read Richard Dawkins and a number of other folks who have contributed to this conversation, right off the bat, issue number one. So one of the biggest issues that we need to hear, that we need to listen to, is that one of the biggest issues that atheists have with the way in which organized religion thinks is our pretty substantial, pretty historical, combative relationship with science. Okay? Many of you know this to be true. You've experienced this firsthand. You've been inside churches that have made it seem like faith and science cannot coexist. In fact, this was an increasing frustration I had early on in the church, that it felt like some of the churches I attended were making it seem like I had to pick a side. I had to pick a team. And oftentimes you will hear theologians, you'll hear teachers, you'll hear preachers they'll say words like, you can either believe in science or you can believe in God. And so as a result of that, oftentimes people inside the pews feel like they have this really tense relationship. Like, oh, am I trusting God or am I trusting the data? And it feels like I have to pick a team. So historically, what this has done is this has led the people in the faith community to ignore scientific data, to ignore biologists, therapists. So mental illness and mental health is a big piece of this, where we also experience the implications of this. And so the first issue I want to get you to see that individuals within the sort of atheist or agnostic community have with the ways in which we think is our historical combative relationship with science. We oftentimes have said that you can't allow these two things to coexist. You got to pick one and you got to really commit to it. Okay, so that's the first issue that I want to raise. Second issue. The second issue that atheists and agnostic folks have with organized religion, and particularly the ways in which organized religion thinks, is they've also, in addition to that, they've also found our proofs for God to not be too convincing. Our proofs for God that we have put out there. Again, when we have this sort of combative relationship with science, we say, well, no, we've got truth. We are the ones who have it all figured out, and we can prove it. So religion went a step further and said, we can prove the existence of God. And so just some examples of the proofs that Christianity specifically has made, but this, I think, and other religions have also promoted similar similar concepts. The first theory that a religion has put forth is this sort of unmoved mover theory. Unmoved mover theory. And so this was actually originally asserted by Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas was a theologian that lived several centuries ago. And he said that, when we look at the very beginning of the universe, the very beginning of creation, someone had to move things to make all this come about. Like, someone had to get the ball rolling. It couldn't have just started on its own. There had to be a mover who moved everything into existence. Okay, so that's one theory that organized religion has put forth, is that is proof that God exists, unequivocally, empirically. And so scientists and folks who ascribe to a more atheist agnostic worldview have not found that too compelling. They've not found that too convincing. They have come along and said, well, that's actually not necessarily true. It doesn't have to necessarily be true, because we've got some scientific data, and they refer to this as the Big Bang Theory, the early part of creation, that there actually is some data that suggests that the different molecules and particles could sort of collide together and interact and engage one another, causing a massive chemistry reaction that sort of sent all of the created order into its current state that we're experiencing it now, i.e. creation happened, right? And so that is one theory that we have promoted that not necessarily has been too convincing so far. Another one is called the ontological argument. So this one arrived, this also existed the last several centuries. It was the argument that, well, since we cannot conceive of another being as high or as almighty as God, That is proof that God exists. That the fact that we can imagine God, that we can think of this God, that we can imagine an almighty being who can create and bring the world into being, that is proof, ontological proof that God exists. And this has also been not very convincing for our atheist friends. They have said, well, imagination doesn't necessarily constitute reality, right? So the fact that I can imagine a purple unicorn, but it doesn't mean that one exists. It doesn't mean that one is out there. And so that, too, is not convincing. Some of the other proofs that we've put out there is the beauty of creation. Now, I have deep appreciation for nature and being outside and the beautiful expanse of the world in which we live in. And so some people of faith have said, that is evidence. That's evidence. When you look around, that's evidence that God is real, that God exists. Atheists have not found that convincing either. They said, well, beauty is subjective. Beauty is subjective. So like you could walk out and see a landscape and say, holy cow, that's beautiful. And the next person could walk along and say, yeah, I actually prefer the beach, or I actually prefer this. I don't really find it that majestic. And so beauty is kind of beholden to the particular person who sees it and who is talking about it. And then maybe one final one that I think is actually a really important one for us to bring up, because we're going to cover this in the next section, is what's called Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager. So this is the belief that, you might as well hedge your bet. So this is the other proof that organized religion has sort of promoted as to the existence of God. You might as well believe in God and be wrong, because that's a whole lot less risky than not believing in God and being wrong, right? So if you believe in God and you're wrong, well, you still lived a moral life, you try to do good, and maybe nothing happened on the other side of that. But if you don't believe in God and you do whatever you want to do, you live however you want to live, and then you're wrong, that's a riskier wager we shouldn't test out. And we're going to cover this in the second section a little bit more in depth, but a lot of the response I've gotten from folks who are ascribed to more of an atheist worldview have said, well, I certainly don't find that proof for God compelling or convincing or even encouraging, because that God seems like one to be feared. That seems like a God who is just out to smite me if I couldn't make sense of all of the big questions looming in the world, and is punishing me for it. It seems like that is a mean God, or a really, really harsh God. And I don't necessarily know if I want to believe in that God anyway. That's been some of the responses that I've heard from folks. And so how atheists, how agnostics resolve all of these conflicts, how they've resolved sort of all of these different tensions they have with the ways in which organized religion has taught them to think, is they've adopted a strictly secular worldview. That's how they resolve it. They adopt a strictly secular worldview, because they say, well, at least I'm standing on evidence. At least I'm standing on data. At least I'm standing on things that we can see, we can touch, we've proved. And we haven't proved everything, but at least I'm standing on what we know, rather than things that seem to be subjective to one particular religion or people group, right? And so a naturalist would say, no, like when it comes to the creation of the world and when it comes to how we've come into being, all of that happened in and through natural selection. So evolution is how. Like, we've got data that backs this up. We've got proof. We've got evidence that backs this up, that how that he came into the world is not only through a big bang, but then these organisms that existed as sort of microorganisms evolved, and those evolved to even a higher breed, a higher species, all the way up until we are now experiencing the species we encounter today. And so the other thing that I've heard Richard Dawkins say on a couple of different occasions, he said that the other benefit to this, the other benefit to this is, the other advantage is that they see their worldview as much more humble than ours. Now, don't get frustrated, like, hear me out on this. Atheists, they might even in fact have a point. They say, when we encounter religion, when we encounter people of faith, oftentimes they make it seem like their claims are certain, that they are proven, that you can see and touch those proofs that God exists. And at least we are saying, hey, we're going to stand on what we know. We're going to stand on the data, the things that we can see and prove, and we're going to be okay with the things that we don't know. We're going to leave room. We're going to leave space, that there is also still a bunch we don't know, which is oftentimes not something that they've encountered inside faith communities. We sometimes haven't been as good as in embracing the things that we don't know. We seem to be, and we tend to be, at least in many people's experience outside the church, very, very certain on all the things that we hold to be true. And so here's what I want to do with the last couple of moments we have together. Again, the other goal of this course, now that you've heard a little bit of how an atheist would react and respond to some of the ways in which organized religion has historically and currently thinks through their religion, their worldview. Now that you've heard that and you better understand it, I want you don't have to agree with it, but I want you to sit with it and sort of digest it. And then what I want to do in these last couple of minutes is I want us to think through and process what are some faithful responses we can make to some of those criticisms? What are some things we can learn from those criticisms so that, again, as I shared at the very beginning of this course, we can arrive at a version of Christianity that is healthier, that is more faithful, and that is more true. Okay, so the very first thing should not be a shocker. The very first lesson I think we can learn when it comes to the ways in which we think and the criticisms or the concerns that folks outside the church have of the ways in which we think is we've got to improve our relationship with science. If you are a person of faith or if you're a leader in the church, please, we have to do better work in cultivating a healthier relationship with science, with reason. Again, like I said at the very beginning of this session, if it's true, we don't need to be afraid of it. Does it stand the possibility of changing what we've always thought or believed, or does it change how we might approach our scriptures or read or interpret a particular scripture? Yeah, maybe. But if it's true, then it is of God and we need to hear it. We need to listen to it. Okay? I love the John 16 passage where Jesus says, I'm going to send you the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is going to lead you into all truth. And what I love so much about that is that what that means is that the disciples who were listening to Jesus didn't have it all figured out. They didn't have every single piece of God and their systematic theology all figured out in that moment. Jesus was kind of forewarning them, kind of foreshadowing for them, you're going to continue to learn and learn and learn. And the process of learning is also going to be an unlearning. And so improving our relationship with science, improving our relationship with the biologists, with the medical professionals, with the therapists and the mental health professionals, improving our relationship with them and allowing these two things to dance together, to allow faith and science to dance together. I've always said this is my sort of chief belief when it comes to how those two can dance together. Faith was actually never meant to tell you how, so take the example of evolution, take the example of creation. The scriptures and faith was never meant to tell you how exactly it came into being, how the world came into being, methodically, scientifically. But what the Bible and what our faith is supposed to teach us and inform us on is the why and the who that was behind it. And so if a person of faith and a person of science are sitting together and you look up at the stars, what's so wonderful, what's so beautiful is they can have a comprehensive conversation if they're allowed to coexist, because the person of science can say, hey, let me tell you how stars work. Let me tell you how black holes work. Let me tell you the physics behind it, how all this works. And then the person of faith can say, and let me tell you why. Let me tell you who. Let me tell you about this God that orchestrated all of this. To love us and to bring us into communion with God. And so the first lesson that I hope we can learn is improving our relationship with science and with the science community, allowing these two things to coexist together. Another lesson that I think that we can cultivate from this conversation so far is we not only need to improve our relationship with the science community, but we really, really, really need to improve our relationship with mystery. We need to improve our relationship with the things that we don't know, which is almost ironic. Like, you would think people of faith, above all else, would be okay with the unknown, okay with mystery. We say all the time, 2 Corinthians, we walk by faith, not by sight. You would think it would be something we do very naturally. But historically, it's not been the case. And this happened about the time in the Enlightenment. And after that, I think that the church and religion and other folks started to feel threatened by the science community, started being threatened by the different proofs out there for different scientific discoveries and such. And so we shifted. We said, oh, we're not going to be people of faith anymore. We're going to be people of certainty. We're not going to be people of mystery. Like, we're going to find all the answers and preach and talk like we have all the answers, even if they're not well formulated, even if they're incomplete, even if we're not even totally sure about them. And so improving our relationship not only with science, but with mystery, being okay with the unknown. Richard Rohr, he has this line. He says, we need to not be afraid of mystery, because mystery is not that which we cannot know. It is simply that which we cannot ever reach the end of. We can only endlessly know it. Which is just a fancy way of saying mystery, the things that are a mystery in this world. It's not things we can't, it's not to say we can't know them, but it is to say that we'll never be able to reach the bottom. We'll never be able to go, ha, got it, figured out, got it totally figured out, and here it all is. Richard Rohr, who is a Catholic theologian, I think he's spot on here, that this is what the person of faith is doing, and this is how they're operating. They are approaching mystery with curiosity, instead of feeling threatened or combative towards it. Okay? And then finally, one final thing I would share, one lesson I think we can glean from this is I think people of faith need to listen to this, and we need to improve our relationship with science. We need to improve our relationship with mystery. And then finally, I really think it's important that we also improve our relationship with the natural world around us. I think for a very, very long time, people of faith have held this view that there is this very clear distinction between the supernatural world and the natural world, the heavenly world and the earthly world, that God is up here in the spiritual stuff, and we're down here kind of in the earthly stuff, trying to kind of live in both, if you will. And what's so fascinating is that seems more and more to me like a human construct, that the very clear division between the spiritual realm and the earthly realm seems to not be something that God constructed, but that we constructed. Because the scriptures actually paint a very, very different story. The scriptures, at least in the Christian tradition, paint a very, very different story, that God has not spent all of God's time separating those worlds, but marrying them together. Genesis chapter 1, God creates human beings and makes us in his image and likeness. So the very beginning of the story, God infused God's DNA into creation, so that every single person you interact with has God living in them as well. John chapter 1, Jesus, when he comes on his big rescue mission, he doesn't sort of just zap the world and fix it. Jesus becomes one of us. He infiltrates and becomes one with creation. Ephesians 4, Paul writes and says that the God that we talk about, the God that we worship, is one who is above all, with all, and in all. What I'm trying to get you to see is that increasingly it seems like the goal of religion has always been to separate those worlds and say, well, God's up here and we're down here. God's in the spiritual realm and we're in the earthly realm. And that's the goal of religion, to kind of separate those things and then teach you how to climb the ladder up to the spiritual realm. When it seems like God has been doing the opposite all along. God has been coming down to us. God's been marrying these worlds together. God's been trying to tell us that, yes, the world to come matters, but this one matters as well. And so you can find me here. You can tend to me here. You can encounter me in the ways in which you care not only for your soul, the spiritual part of yourself, but as you tend to the world. I love the picture that we get in Revelation chapter 21 is that how this whole story is going to end is that there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth that come down here. So just think of how different that is than the popular conception of heaven, where we get kind of zapped up to heaven. That is not the way that the scriptures, at least in the Christian tradition, speaks of the world to come. It speaks as a God and a new world, a new life coming down to this one. And so whenever we take care of creation, whenever we take care of our bodies, whenever we take care of ourselves, which again has been a really big criticism with the ways in which atheists think about religion, is we tend to talk so much about the next life that we've abandoned the responsibilities of this one. And we'll talk about this more in the next section when we talk about the ways in which we act. But that has often been another criticism, is that they look at religion and we're not tending well to the world. We're trying to escape or evade the world. And friends, what I hope, one of the other relationships that I hope we can improve is our relationship with this one. Because anytime we tend to this world, we're also tending to the future heavens, the future earth that are going to exist here, not somewhere else. And so that's plenty for us to chew on here in session 1. We'll hit the timeout button there, okay? And so here at the end, what I want you to do is go ahead, if you've not already done so, go ahead and access that application guide. It's got a lot of this material sort of listed there for you as you're taking notes. If you missed something and you didn't catch it, you can. A lot of it is captured there. And there is some places for discussion. And so I hope that at the close of each of these sessions, you're also taking that information, you're processing it further, you're chewing on it. And then you're trying to think through where in your own life can you, particularly those of you who are people of faith, can you really heed and hear the comments that are being shared, the reflections and the personal experiences that our non-believing friends have of us and of our faith systems, so that we can better love them and listen to them and understand them, and so that we can maybe evolve our own faith to something more faithful and something more true. Okay? So head over to the application guide, and I'll look forward to seeing you back for session 2.